Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Westfield Washington Township Advisory Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. Going to the first item on our agenda is a presence of a quorum. Can you please confirm?
Mr. Mugopus? Present. Ms. Carlson?
Present.
Mr. Horke? Mr. Khan? Dr. Keen?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Mooney?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Present.
And Mr. Woodard.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. I have no items on the agenda that are changing or announcements of any changes. So we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is the tabled APC appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I believe there was one candidate interested. He was not available, so we didn't want to volunteer him and vote him while he wasn't here. I've spoken to Dr. Keen and he is willing to serve again. Therefore, I would open the floor for nominations for that appointment. It is a one-year appointment, correct? Two-year appointment. Two-year appointment.
New 2-year.
New two-year appointment. You were kind of in the middle of a term when you got appointed. So is there a nomination?
Make a motion to nominate Dr. Mark Keen to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Second.
Some motion by Mr. Bunkefist and a second by Mr. Woodard. Any further nominations? Seeing and hearing none, nominations are closed. There is one name before us. We'll take this by a voice vote. All in favor of appointing Dr. Keen, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Keen, congratulations.
Thank you. And I'll apologize for missing the meeting last time. I did show up on the 15th to City Hall. I can't understand this meeting was on the 15th, not the 14th.
I did too. I was wrong. I called
okay.
you.
Okay.
And I never paid attention to the agenda to see that there was a date change or.
I don't know
how it got
what.
changed, but
We changed it because we were all with the mayor at the thing at the high school. So, we apologize for
So
that.
you weren't in Aruba? You weren't on a beach in Aruba or anything?
although actually I would not be here in the next meeting. That would be
Get ready to
bad.
go. He's
I'm
ready to go.
flying, yeah.
Understood.
Well, very good. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes from January 14th, 2025. What is the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Moved by Councilor McCarty, second by Mrs. Carlson.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next will be the reading of the rules of procedure for tonight's proceedings. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. Yeah, tonight's meeting is a workshop meeting. Just a few general rules of procedures. The department will introduce the petition stating when the item was last before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission and the petitioner will then discuss changes made to the ordinance. Once the discussion has finished, the department will summarize the final changes that are expected to be made prior to the petition returning for a future recommendation. Some rules of conduct: please do not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, then we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time. If you must answer them, then please quietly exit the room. We would like to remind those attending virtually to please mute your microphone when not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to the remainder of our agenda, we have no consent items for tonight. We have no items of business for tonight. So as noted, we have two workshop items. First being 2412-PUD-28 Grand Universe PUD. We'll start with a staff recap, followed by a discussion and presentation with the developer.
Yeah, good evening, Plan Commission. Kevin Todd for the record here with Community Development Department. As mentioned, this item before you for workshop discussion is the proposed Grand Universe PUD, which would encompass approximately 66 acres of land, which is currently zoned to Links PUD. This would replace the Links PUD zoning. Project is split into 4 sub areas, as we talked about at the public hearing. Just as a quick recap, there's the Sports Entertainment District, Town Center District, Resort District, and finally the Grand Universe District. This item was introduced at the November 11th City Council meeting, held a neighborhood meeting on November 25th, and a public hearing at your December 2nd meeting. There's really been no substantive changes to date since the public hearing, but with that, I'll turn it over to the development team to kind of refamiliarize yourselves with the rest of the project, and we'll go from there.
Certainly. Good evening. My name is Andy Metzel. I'm an attorney at the Taft Law Firm. And with me, as you can see in the room, we have a whole host
An
of
army.
individuals. Yeah, an army.
I was looking for a space term. I couldn't come up with one. Space Force.
Space Force? That's
Good, the Space Force, stormtroopers.
But it's not, I think that everybody is so excited about this project and lots of different angles of contribution. So everything from the Browning Day folks with regard to design issues and American Structure Point with regard to engineering. And then, everyone has so much input in history and working with the project. So if there's a question that we can't answer tonight, holy cow. I'm not sure who could. But I don't think I need to belabor the point that Mr. Todd mentioned just about the 4 districts. We did have a very productive meeting at the library. Lots of folks in attendance, curious, questions asked. Really not any substantive comments with regard to the PUD itself. Lots of questions about, development and things like that and the vision for the project and when and how. But as far as the specifics of the PUD, not a lot of feedback. A couple of comments that we've received. One gentleman couldn't remember if he had received notice or not, but I think we've resolved that issue. He's immediately adjacent property owner. I know that Mr. McCauley is going to be meeting with him. They've had several meetings with him already. And so really just some more, maybe more recent in time meetings so that everybody can be on the same page with what's happening, especially since it's right next door to him.
Is this Mr. Roberts?
It is.
That's one.
Yeah. And so, in his property, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down just a touch. The other down, I guess. So his property is immediately to the east. You can almost see his residence right there. And so there have been lots of conversations with him even about acquiring that property.
I'm going to interject just to let you know, if you'll take your cursor down south a little bit, right there. Well, that whole tree section there, that's all wetlands, by the way. And it is, it's not to be disturbed, period.
You want to tell him who you are?
Yeah, for the record,
I'm sorry, Arden Johnson. I'm the CEO and president of Grand Universe Development.
And Mr. Johnson's been involved in developing a lot of different kinds of property throughout his very interesting career. And he has a lot of experience as a developer, so he has lots of input. So we had those comments from the adjacent property owner, then some questions from folks who are immediately across the street. And I want to say, really in alignment, they'd be just north of where it says Town Center District. So you have some residential properties there. They had some concerns that if this here is developed into an access road, that they were concerned about lights shining into their property. As you can see, here would be the entrance, the light, their properties are back here respectively. I think we've tried to talk about that. As you know, the fire station is going to be immediately to the east. I have a feeling that if there are concerns about traffic and lights and things like that, the fire station might be more of a contributor, a good contributor in some ways than anybody, but.
And we're a right turn only out. It's so, there. And I understand you have a medium there, but we were talking beforehand. I'm sure that medium will come out once the fire department comes in. They're not going to want to turn right all the time and go down to a roundabout to come back and go left for an emergency call. So I'm assuming you'll be looking at removing that medium at some point in front of the fire station.
Not diminishing their concerns, right? At this point, we don't have the exact vision for how the property will be developed along 191st. We have built in some flexibility just for setbacks because it's really dependent on how it grows up and having that meaningful discussion with you all as whatever is identified immediately adjacent to the road comes to fruition. So as you can see along 191st, there's a significant amount of park-like area in the sports entertainment district. And so those things will create some natural buffering, particularly along 191st. And it carries over to detention areas and more buffering that would be included along 191st and the project itself. So we do feel like there's a lot of thought given to buffering. And it really, at this point, to get to the narrowness of headlights, it's a very specific focus for us to try to address it. At this juncture, with this PUD. Not to say that it shouldn't be discussed as the property grows up, though, for sure. And those are really the only comments we had.
Well, there was one other one I want to bring up because it is important, and that was on the artifacts. To let you know that this research, the shortest rocket we can find right now, booster, is 227 feet tall. They go up to 440 feet now. We're not going to do any of that, but the ones that we're trying to acquire from Tesla or SpaceX are 220 feet tall, basically. And we're looking at 3 or 4 of those old booster rockets. So that would be the tallest artifacts out there. Again, to accentuate, this is Grand Universe. This is a space science center.
And they would be down further south on the property.
Correct.
Not at Black.
Well, they show it. You see one right there in the middle of that roundabout. Yep, right there. You see another one down the intersection there. Yep, and that roundabout. And then we think the city ought to use one in their main roundabout up there at the.
All in favor? Oh, no, sorry.
Is there a concern with the height?
I think
They-
it was just in passing. One
Yeah.
of the neighbors had commented, well, I'm not sure I really want to see an artifact from my house. And so, we haven't done a study from the sightlines of those residents or if there are other things that would already obscure the view. Plus not really having the exact dimensions of anything that's going to be developed that would
Right.
create its own buffer. I mean, it's hard to tell if they'll be able to see it, but these are not small by design. I
Well,
mean,
how tall is the actual Grand Universe building for the planetarium?
What was it? What was the end height on it? 165
So
feet.
this is like much taller than the building.
Another 60 feet. Yeah,
Yeah.
40, 60 feet tall.
Just trying to picture it.
Well, that's sort of a misnomer too, ma'am, because we are gonna have to build the building up a little bit, bring soil up, which is gonna raise that whole site where the building is. So at the end of the day, they could be pretty darn
Pretty
close to
level,
each
so
other.
it's not like one's overshadowing
Yes,
the
ma'am.
other.
You know, if I could interject, those SpaceX boosters, full stack with the second stage installed is about 225 feet.
Correct.
We're probably just going to use the first stage. The
Which is
first
not-
stage would be maybe 150,
135.
135 maybe. You've seen them. They're the ones that re-land themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we.
We're gonna see if we can re-land one out here. That'd be great.
Have you been to Huntsville, Alabama?
Mhm.
Same thing, or Kennedy Space.
That's
Center. You
right.
can-
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
exactly.
That'd be cool, but
I mean, once it's integrated in the site and you have other development around it, it doesn't look like this
blends
giant
in, yeah.
pillar.
They're only 16 feet in diameter, so they're tall as skin,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
But those are really we didn't get a lot of substantive feedback, a lot of excitement, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But as far as the actual PUD itself, not a lot of substantive feedback or objections with the way that it was drafted. I mean, I think we tried to follow the ordinance as close as possible, but build in flexibility so that we don't have to come back at every meeting with every inch of development, but at the same time, knowing that each design, each component is going to require a lot of layers of approval.
Excellent. Any comments, questions from my fellow commissioners?
I think one thing I've been curious about, I looked at this plan and I've not had a chance to ask about it. What about the pedestrian crossing? Is that Tomlinson, right? Is that what primary north-south there?
Well, Tomlinson Road has been removed now, as you can see there. And if you're talking about pedestrian crossing from Graham Park, is that what you're?
Yeah,
referring to,
like
sir?
around that roundabout north of there.
It's gonna be up there. I mean, the road is the new roadway that we're putting in there is a limited speed one. I mean, there'll be speed bumps and ways to bring it down. So what's the road that's in Carmel?
It's range line there
Right,
at
yeah, where
Mac
they,
and Miller's.
you have to drive very slow down it. We don't want people rushing through there because you hit on a point that we've always said, we're gonna have tens of thousands of kids walking back and forth and on the grounds all the time. So we wanna, that's something that we're very cognizant of making sure that they have safety in getting across there everywhere.
So there's how would a person feed in foot traffic? What would be
From Grand Park?
From Grand Park? Where would your access points be? Would they be from the trail?
We will have access from the trail.
The only step right now, you see that where the ditch is, there is, just south of that, there is already like a, what do you call that on the trail?
A culvert or something?
No, it's like,
Trailhead.
A trailhead?
Oh,
yeah, where you hook it up
For a future road.
a perpendicular trail.
I got you.
That's the only one that I've seen on the Monon. We'd be more than willing to have more than that access. I think it's a better idea. If you look there, it looks almost like they had planned like Grand Park behind on the north side of the Ball Diamonds to create a walkway
Yeah.
up to the Monon there. And that's a great crossing. It'd be right where the resort is right now.
I got you. So from what is that north-south primary road through that? Yeah, it's Tomlinson. I
Tomlinson,
mean, that
yeah.
becomes
To be vacated and become Grand Universe Boulevard.
Grand
Something
Universe.
Something else.
Okay. And then, so how many, if you got 10,000 people there, what are the like traffic units that come up and down through that road? Or do you think, like, what percentage of people do you think are foot traffic
Well,
versus?
Well, let me put it this way.
And I'm not.
We can't do anything with Tomlinson Road or build the resort hotel until Chad Hiddle is built
Yeah.
to bring people around the thing. I mean, if that's not, right now, the hotel sits in Tomlinson Road. I mean, so that has to be taken out. Plus, when we do the utility relocate down along the Monon Trail, because that's where we have to relocate all the sewer and water, because it runs perpendicular through the property, or an angle through the property now. So that's why we're staging it. We're going to keep Tomlinson Road open until Chad Hiddle is done, and you can route traffic around. And then you have traffic patterns way over here on Chad Hiddle side, plus the front. So your normal travel to the Grand Universe would be from the 191st roundabout down the new Grand Universe Road, to this other roundabout, and then over to the Space Center.
Yeah. So what you're saying is most of the most traffic will be bypassed
Yes, sir.
The through traffic.
outside of through
Sure.
traffic,
Through traffic,
right?
from the public.
Redirected.
Unless they're going, these are all destinations.
Yeah.
And so tons of parking garages, and we could point out a bunch of, each specific district having its own parking garage.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to, let's say, the Space Center, then you're going to be, the Science and Space Center, you're going to be parking probably down at that location and then walking around as needed. So you wouldn't have to park over and over again.
And that's actually where you see the behind Grand Universe. That's a 2-story underground parking garage also.
Yeah. Well, and you guys, if you've followed any Westfield news in the last 5 years or 10 years, there's been a fair amount of arguing about underpass exits on the Monon Trail. And, it seems like that is such a walkable place for next door to such a walkable place already, right? That I just think that contemplating how they're getting across Grand Park Boulevard is.
Yeah, I encourage you to build a walkway over the Monon Trail over to us.
Yeah, imagine, yeah. I would just think that the amount of foot traffic is gonna be extraordinary.
And to add to this, the Chad Hiddle addition that comes down around the southern part of the property has been a part of Westfield's thoroughfare plan for years, long before we had decided to purchase this
Yeah.
property.
I was gonna actually mention that, so thank you, Greg. Yeah, that's been in the works for a long time. And then last year, when the capital improvement plan was released, it was accounted for, but not until like 2030, 2031. But obviously, with the potential approval of this new rendition of the project, that would escalate the timeline in order to get that done first before other areas are able to build on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't have a question. I'm
Dr.
gonna
Keen?
become redundant, but I've kind of been with this for almost 10 years now, and I'm anxious to see it get going. And so I'm excited about this. And in fact, when President Trump was speaking yesterday and talked about planting a flag on Mars,
This is your visual.
Elon Musk
this,
with
that this is another inspiration to the youth of the country in the science arena. And I can envision school groups coming here to visit the Grand Universe, Children's Museum, if it's the right age group there, and even the new 500 museum, and there's an awful lot of STEM types of things that would bring a lot of people into this area. So I think the excitement this is going to generate, and I've said it before, I think this will be bigger than the Grand Park will be.
All
This will bring more people here.
planetariums, which there's quite a few in the nation, are the #1 destination for school trips
In their states.
in their state. And we know this will be the #1 destination also.
I have one more question, or suggestion, I guess, about the residents that are concerned about the headlights coming into their, I've heard this on numerous times with different developments. So, I'm just thinking, plant a bunch of arborvitaes along there. Just say, you're gonna get a bunch of arborvitaes, this is how we're gonna solve it, get nice 8-foot ones or whatever. And, a couple of years, they're gonna be 10 or 12 feet tall, and they won't even have that.
I don't think they were-
Buffer.
That wasn't their concern,
Yeah.
man. It was where we come out on the road.
Right.
But again, we're turning right only. The
Is
homes are to our left.
And this
And
is
so the
the back of the
headlights
road.
really,
So I'm looking at 191st Street.
Right
You're
there.
saying put
Oh,
them
yeah.
in their yard?
And this was, this whole part of the development is years away. I mean, we're building Grand Universe and the hotel, the conference center and resort first. This comes much later on.
Okay, I was just talking about the roundabout along 191st Picture
Right here.
Street, and those people that are concerned
Mm.
about that is.
I don't think it was the roundabout as much as it was this.
Right, what they're planning.
That's the
If
road
people
right
were
there.
driving down this way, the headlights would shine into their homes.
Okay. so
it
that's
just,
what
it was a
I'm wondering.
one gentleman that made the
Okay,
comment.
That roundabout's.
I guess,
Yeah, and we see the new fire station 84 goes right here.
yeah,
And I mean, that's gonna be a problem for them as well, I would think. Maybe we can come up with some sort of a combined solution somehow.
Well,
Yeah.
we did talk because the fire department is wanting to do their museum there.
Mhm.
They've asked if they could use our exit lane as their exit lane to give them more room. We said, sure. So it's not me you're gonna have to worry about. It's all the fire department runs, and emergency runs that they do. That's where they're gonna get the headlights, not from us necessarily.
Well, not for a long time.
Yeah, well, for
yeah,
years.
that's a while out.
Yeah.
But
Well,
if
and-
there's something you can do to mitigate that early on, so the trees get to be large enough before
Sure.
that happens. I'm just throwing it out there.
Point well taken.
We can do that for you, ma'am.
Don't do it for me, I don't care.
But going back to an earlier point that was made is that, just again, the elements closer to 191st are several years away. And at this point in the process, it's difficult to account for things like that because, quite honestly, might be coming back for something else or, whatever it is, where then you can really look at the overall DDP or ODP and you can be more intentful and purposeful with the trees and where you're planting certain things. So, and then just kind of on that, as well as picking back off of Dr. Keene, just ready to see this come into fruition. I believe you mentioned last time and stroke a thought with myself as well, just showing up to a chamber luncheon, how many ever years ago. And I think it was a State of the City by former Mayor Cook, and he ended it with just showing an image of a previous rendition of what Green Universe might be. And he just left it as that. He was just like, look at this and mull over it, And so thinking back to then versus now, it's just, it's already come a long way. And the use is basically already approved and we're just expanding the scope here. So.
Yes, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Mooney?
It's kind of a point of clarification for our group. So as they built up the fire station and some of the road changes, what would prompt that to come back in for a workshop if there were changes to it? Like if there was a large material change to something on an adjoining property that affected the design, would that prompt it to come back in?
It's hard to know. I mean, this thing is written in a way that gives quite a bit of flexibility in building layout, building configuration. I mean, there are some architectural standards that need to be met, but so I guess to the extent that maybe architecture can't be met or there's a vastly different vision for a certain sub-district or something,
Yeah.
that would be a trigger to come back or, perhaps different uses or.
Because I'm just thinking out loud because we haven't seen a project of this magnitude over such a timeline. And we talked about that on previous projects, right? You've got an ever-changing area. So just kind of thinking out loud on
No,
that.
that's a great point. And furthermore, though, I would say that unless it's some substantive change, it wouldn't be coming before this body. I would foresee it becoming, coming before the plat committee, because that's where now they see the ODPs and so forth, and just our appointees to the plat committee being able to pinpoint, oh, actually, you should have this here or whatever like that. So that'll be probably time and place to address it.
Further comment or question? In closing, I'll make just a comment or two. Obviously, we've had a robust discussion, but at the same time, there isn't really a lot to change, right? You came here with no changes. I don't think we've really provided any items for change. Part of that was because, to Mr. Mooney's point, this is so expansive. We want to get it right, and we want to make sure that everyone has their say, and city council has plenty of time to have input. Our council, our commission does. And so, you know, around the State House, people are talking to me, where I work, even talk about this. They call it Westfield Spaceport. You know, with this, which, yes, I'll PM trademarked. Yeah. So we'll talk. You know, the excitement around this is not just here. I mean, people are talking about it at, you know, tourism and all that kind of stuff downtown. And so I'm super excited for that. It's a great project. I will just leave the note. I think some of my commissioner colleagues have said, just as this builds out, because it's such a long time frame, to just be as courteous and helpful to the neighbors there as possible. And I know you will. I think I feel that in what you're saying and in your heart, and be cognizant of that, because I'm guessing some of these people are going to continue to still live here. Maybe at some point they think this, hey, I want to move, and then we'll deal with that as that comes. But as courteous to your neighbors and helpful as you can be, we would greatly appreciate it, because this is transformative for this area, and it's going to take them time to adjust. If there's no further comment or question, Kevin, do we have a recap?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. There really wasn't a lot of discussion that generated changes that we made to the ordinance. I'm missing the boat on that. Speak up now. But I will say, one of the things that somebody said up there caught my attention, mentioned the Grand Universe building perhaps being up to 165 feet in height. The ordinance currently limits it to 150 feet,
150,
so we'll need to make sure that modification gets made in a revision prior to coming back, as long as everybody's okay with that.
Yeah, that's because of our planetarium inside that dome, and to get our steel structure above it,
Yeah,
we have
so-
to have it raised.
You know, maybe add in another 5 or 10 feet in there too, just make sure we have enough
Okay.
Can I ask
wiggle room in the height.
Can I ask a semantical question? Why does that specific district have a height requirement when the others do not?
It's a great question. Can you guys speak to that?
I think we were just trying to add some definition to the first thing that is being constructed, because it really is sort of the domino that makes everything else come into place. And so the idea was not to make it, you know, it's difficult for people to have a concept in their head without having height.
And
So
our
that's a really
goal
good
was to
question.
make Grand Universe, the Space Science Center, the premier building on the site. We don't want anybody above us. You know, the rest of the buildings, we want to keep, you know, a floor lower or something. So that's why we put the height up there, so that we would have a determination, talking to our hotel partners and other ones, why we had picked that size.
Well, it's 150 feet because it was what you guys put in the PUD the original time it came through, right? Am I correct or no?
So, I mean, we,
That's how it's written.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Can we
that's
live
why.
with 150?
But no, you can change that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I guess my
To
question,
build some extra.
more questions now. Sorry. So,
About to wrap it up.
well, if your goal is to
Move it up.
talk to end users on what their height requirements are, then why are you leaving those sub-districts with no minimum or maximum?
That's a good question.
I should say really no maximum. And so if the barometer is your district, you should have, it should be flipped, in my opinion. If the epicenter of this development is going to be the catalyst of the planetarium, then that should be no maximum, and your other sub-district should be.
Right.
And then that intentional transition to the neighbors to the north is that other protection piece, because, I mean, topo's a difference of what, 5 or 10 feet between you and them. You raise it maybe a foot or two, whatever that happens, right? But if the goal is to mitigate height and help with the transition, I believe that should be flipped.
That's a good point.
Good point.
I have another question. Does that same height restriction apply to the artifacts?
No, it does not.
And then, so how tall is a like 4-story hotel or 5-story hotel, or like how many stories and how many rooms can a hotel have?
Well, if
To be
you
below.
plan 12 to 15 feet per floor, ma'am, that gives you an idea. So if you're going 4, you're at 60 feet.
Yeah.
So 5, 15, 75.
I guess to be fair, within the town district, there's a story requirement and not so much a height requirement. But I think more for me than anything, if that's your true intent, is to be intentional on the transition and be intentional that you stay the centerpiece. What's the first thing a developer does when they buy property? How dense and how high, right? And so I think whatever you bring back, I'm supportive of, but maybe be more intentional in the thought as you come back for a vote at whatever meeting that may be.
That came up in conversation on one of the town projects that we looked at. Spot on.
Well, now that's first question for me as I was talking to Councilor McCarty. Are there height restrictions on what this, I guess, would be considered art? The spaceships are considered art artifacts, forgive me, the spaceships. Yeah.
Currently as written, there's those be viewed different.
I'm not looking for one, I just,
It doesn't mean you can build a statue of yourself in your front yard. So, but,
I had.
sorry, you yield my time.
Yeah, I mean, we actually defined the term as inspiring artifacts because
Yeah.
there really wasn't anything on all fours in the ordinance itself
No,
to
no,
sort of
I-
make
It's
it.
more of a process
Similar
question. I
Mhm.
think the taller the better, because I think they're cool, but I don't live there. I live somewhere else in town, so I understand. Just a question.
And maybe to expand on that, would there be any limitations in, say, the UDO or just anything else within city rules and regulations dictating art installations such as artifacts?
No.
I think we just want to be cognizant of any FAA height.
Yes.
Requirements, that's usually where it comes into play when you're getting it.
Do they have to have a blinker on top?
If it gets to a certain height, yeah, and the proximity to the airport. Mhm.
If we could use spaceport, could we put a heliport out there?
I want to send you to the third floor. with a-
Okay.
Station with them.
Downtown Ellenport.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Any other, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think the closest tallest structure to this that might be a similar size to say the SpaceX rocket is the tower over on Spring Mill Road. I'm not quite sure how tall that is. But yeah, it's got lights at the top and so forth. To your point of FAA, so.
Well, the concrete plants. Like out on Ditch or whatever, keep on going. Those would be the tallest structures in Westfield, would they? Yeah, I think those are like way up there. 180 feet.
Oh, way out there.
Well,
Yeah, right next to the airport.
Yeah.
ironically.
Yeah.
Gotta have guardrails.
While we're on the topic of cell towers, any opportunity to co-locate antenna on these artifacts?
Hey, stick it inside one of those booster rockets.
We just looked it up. The booster's 135.
135, okay.
135.
What height do you need for your thought?
Oh, I don't
Does it
have
matter?
a thought. I
Just
just,
curious.
I mean, I know we try to co-locate those things as
Just aesthetically
often as we
speaking.
can, so we have fewer towers in the community.
Sure.
We already have something 130 feet in the air, then that may be an opportunity. I don't
200
know if it works or not, but
Didn't mean to interrupt.
for you guys.
So
but
the
something to
the
think
booster would be below the top of the building. It
Two
would
hundred
not-
feet, they generally say is red light.
is red light.
I've had some
Received
cell tower experience, good, bad, or indifferent, and I mean, the structure itself would have to be, it would be a tower masked as an artifact, so.
Okay. So that may not be what we're.
Yeah, so all the guts and feathers would have to be inside an artifact.
Well, no, we could.
Usually it's not like you just stick an array.
My
at the
place
top.
in Jacksonville, we've got towers that look like trees,
Yeah.
guys. You can't tell the difference.
Or flagpoles.
We could throw something like that. I think that'd be great because we want connectivity out there, obviously, and
Yeah.
You're just thinking more as people come to you and ask where they can locate a
Yeah,
tower, though you'd
yeah.
like to know you have the
To be
option on the
preemptive,
property.
yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
Genius. It could be cool. but
Yeah.
I do like that idea though, because I believe Fishers has integrated some 5G and some other uses on blended light poles and so forth to mask them, so.
Any other questions or
I
comments?
would say using them as flag poles does not work well. So let's not go down that road.
The
That was.
I've
yeah,
been
a couple
visiting
of
the
it.
planetarium down south. So where you guys, what's it called? The one.
one
done by
down south.
Bloomington?
The link.
Oh, the link. The link.
Oh, the Link Observatory, yeah, right.
That's not.
That's an
planetarium.
observatory.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's where we started, by the way.
Yeah, I was blown away with how neat that was. I took
Oh,
our-
this
we
is
took our
way
family.
beyond that.
Yeah, I get that, but I just, to see it coming here, it's really cool. So it's exciting, exciting stuff.
Any further comment from commissioners or staff? Anything else from you, Kevin? Okay. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you at our recommendation meeting. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll give a moment for our friends to clear the room. I assume they're not going to stay for the next item. And we'll,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be a good one.
So Kevin, I'm sorry, just a quick question. I can't remember if it was one of the prohibited uses in our long list. If we had cell towers on there. If there's interest in a co-location, we might remove that from the prohibiteds, just.
Okay. Bring us all in. Let me tell you, it's a lot of class. Thank you so much. We can.
Kevin, can that be a BZA variance one day too? If they wanted to add a cell tower? Or does it have to be?
Yes, there's like 2 districts where they're allowed by right, but that's not where anybody wants to put them. So most of the ones we have. Yeah, so BZA would be likely.
Yeah. We've seen a couple like temporary relocations. That's why
I saw you at school.
Yeah. Noblesville one.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah. They're going to west and see the spaceship up there and then
Commercial banking.
good to see.
That's right, yeah. I remember that now. Glamorous.
There's something about.
Hey.
Yeah. Remember Facebook, seeing it at the planetarium.
Thank you again very much. Thank you. See you today.
Fantastic. How are you?
Thanks so very much.
See you again.
Appreciate you as well.
Yeah, take care. You drive on your.
Good to see you again, man.
Thank you.
See you again.
Bye, you
Thank
take
very
care.
much. You too.
Go and- Thank you.
Okay.
Motivate kids.
Now that we're reset to the next workshop item 2408-PUD-19, Finley Creek Estates PUD. We'll start with a staff recap and then we will kick it over to the developer.
Thank you, President, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers, the Community Development Department. Before you this evening is the Finley Creek Estates Planning and Development District. This rezone request is to establish the zoning district for a new single-family residential community. Real estate's roughly 44 acres in size. It's located northeast of the intersection of Fremont Moore Road or 93rd Street. This is just north of the recently approved Winterberg community and just west of the Atwater community. The item was last before Plan Commission at the December workshop meeting. The petitioner is here this evening to provide a project update and share some new site plans. Both staff and the petitioner are available. If there are any questions, the petitioner does have a presentation. So with that, this introduction.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good evening. The floor is yours.
For the record, Rex Ramage, Pulte Homes, Dylan Lee, Arbor. So not to bore everyone with the history of the details, but basically the December 16th meeting, I think we all kind of agreed when we broke that, okay, that was maybe clear as mud. Lots of different opinions at the table, totally fine. That's how we refine projects and move forward. So I guess I'll walk you through kind of my mentality about how we approach trying to make some changes, what the merits of each kind of proposal are, and then we can kind of figure out where we stand on that. So on the screen is the version of the plan that was at the December 16th meeting. I think one of the things that we'll, just highlight and pay attention in the top right corner of every slide, there's going to be an average lot size and then a lot depth, just to kind of give some guidance to the conversation for this evening. So these lots were a combination of 70s and then 80-foot wide lots, 135 feet deep, so a lot size of about 9,600 square feet, which in the terms of some of the comments that we'd received was, on the smaller side. So where we went with that was taking some commentary, and then Victor, I think this was kind of your comment, was, hey, there's this community, if you want to get on the second slide, Weston, you can. There's a community at the southeast corner of 161st and Oak Road. So maybe take a look at that. It's a custom community. Let's figure out if we can maybe be more like that. So a couple of things, initially come out to, just jump off the page. I went back to kind of understand the history a little bit more of how it was developed. It started in the mid 90s. And there were houses being built even as a year ago, 18 months ago. So it's taken a long time for a smaller community to develop like this. But how it differs from modern day development is there's no detention, there's no open space, there's no common areas. Those things are actually on the lots themselves. So when we sit here and talk about lot sizes from, hey, let's use precedent community to try to use as a guide, and modern day, there's just kind of a difference on how we do things based on the standards and the codes that are forced upon us, so to speak. So just kind of letting that set the tone as to how we approach maybe some alternative concept plans. So, Weston, if you can go down again. Yep. Yeah, sorry, when this is in PDF, you could just make it all the same size automatically. So while he gets that pulled up, there's two different alternative plans that I want to show you this evening. The first plan doesn't look drastically different from the version that was discussed at the December 16th meeting. However, what we did was we tried to create the largest lots possible. So you'll note that a lot of the lots got deeper in the area in the northern central region. By making a lot as deep as it is, some of these lots are 240 feet deep, which a traditional lot nowadays is 130 to 140. So you're adding 100 feet to the backyard. And so when we're talking about the style of these homes, the price points of these homes, and the fact that they now have a significantly larger lot, people can make those improvements, pool, outdoor grilling area, outdoor kitchen, those types of things, whatever they want to have, those amenities, so to speak, can now be on your own personal lot. So that was the justification for taking away, the amenity area, which almost kind of felt forced in the original design for whatever reason. But what we did is we kind of straightened out the road. It used to be very sweeping curves. We tried to straighten out a little bit, deepen the lots as much as possible. So what happened there was the average lot size went from about 9,600 square feet to 14,100 square feet, a little above that. And then the average lot depth is 194 feet. So we added an average of 60 feet to the depth of the lots. You still have some lots that are more traditionally, the traditional depth. And that's because we simply have to have, the drainage to function and serve the property. So some of these lots are more normal. And then you'll have lots that are much deeper here to the north and then along the entryway further to the south. So that was one version of the plan. And then a second version
Use here.
I'm gonna
So we-
download this for
So
you
we
and then
maybe,
open it up.
maybe do some zooming.
Download the top right.
We'll make this a little easier for everybody to see. It's there's
No, you're fine.
the alternative we just talked about.
Yep, so that was the alternative we just talked about. And then a second alternative, and it really ties into the slide after this, but there are some comments about we don't want to see this property developed right now because of the comprehensive plan. And we kind of looked at the old plan and where the line kind of came through. And we had a pretty good, healthy discussion about it wasn't parcel lines that drove the old comp plan. It was kind of, boundaries and so to speak, and just more sweeping areas. So if the city determines that 85% of this parcel that you see is within that residential comprehensive plan designation, whereas it's not, the agricultural suburban. If this is a more acceptable plan from the city's perspective, when you start to evaluate the comprehensive plan, I guess we'd be willing to take a look at this. Other merits of this individual plan: we don't impact Fremont Moore Road. We really don't impact the neighbors to the west. Eventually if all these get developed as little 5-acre estates, they can all be like each other and they don't have to have, a development sandwich kind of in between them, so to speak. Average lot size actually went up by about 1,000 square feet. Average lot depth went up another 20 feet or so. So while this plan has less units, I think it really is something that as we start to look at all the comments that we've received, this is probably the plan that achieves, best all the items that we were trying to tackle. So I guess with that, then the last slide just kind of shows you an overlay of where the residential kind of line is, so to speak. So it's really just kind of the tip of the cul-de-sac up there. Sorry, that one, yeah. And then this one's just a context map. It has an old version of the concept plan on it, but just putting it in perspective. A couple other, fun facts, I guess. It was very interesting listening to the mayor and Janelle talk today about, the Grand Park master plan and everything, that's really awesome what's going to happen there. It's very interesting for them to say, hey, we want to design this a certain way so that we can activate Grand Park, more of the year, 365 days a year. This parcel is about 1.6 miles from Grand Park, so I think that could help facilitate some growth in the area. And then what I thought was interesting, if you take the northernmost boundary of the city up at 216th Street and the westernmost boundary at County Line, and then you go over to Gray and 146th Street, the geographic center of Westfield is just south of 186 in Springville. So when we kind of open up, what does Westfield look like? How are we going to expand and grow over time? This is more closer to the core of the city than anything else that's kind of before us today. So for what that's worth, I just kind of wanted to throw it out there. No real changes to anything else. I think I just kind of want to present these options, get more additional feedback, and then after that discussion, maybe there's a couple of things that come up. So open to your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Commissioners.
Just to start off, again, I want to show my appreciation and thanks for just all the work that you've put into it and doing the research and thoughtfulness of just in this presentation and each rendition coming back with as well, doing the comparisons and so on and so forth. But I think it might be obvious where I might lean on the two new proposals. So it would be the one that doesn't touch Fremont Moore Road, because that's been one of the bigger critiques of mine. Could I say tonight if I'd be for or against it? No, I could not, because this is the first time of us really diving into this, and then also really needing to get not just everyone else's opinions in the room here, but my fellow counselors and just how this might impact everyone as a whole, because then you're also opening up the discussion that really I might be on the opposite end of the spectrum for, but others again think differently when it comes to amenities and so forth. And I agree with your points of building said amenities if said homeowner wants them at their own property, as opposed to adding additional costs when it comes to HOA maintenance and so forth. But it's just, again, everyone has their own individual opinion on that. So I just wanted to, again, offer my thanks and appreciation. And that's where I would lean, but just not quite sure if that would really do it for me, because it's still opening up the discussion of, is it the correct use? Yes. Is it the correct type of use? That's where I'm still on the fence on, because of for Atwater right next door. I just wanted to have a refresher, so I drove through it before coming here this evening. And again, I know this is kind of beating a drum that's already been discussed previously, but was that a mistake of the past? That's not really something that we can remedy today. But you drive through there and you just see that the only product that's really been built so far there is the duplexes, and some single family individual lot homes are being built. But kind of to a prior point of yours with the neighborhood I previously mentioned, Atwater's taken some time to develop. So is this really the area of people in this market where they want to be, as opposed to when this isn't, quite frankly, especially in today's market of Westfield, entry level, but still as affordable as possible. You're out here on the outskirts. Is it walkable to where people want to be, go grab something to eat and so forth? And And it'll come, but to your point of us building up finally Grand Park, I mean, that's still probably a mile or two away. And so it's not necessarily accessible, if you might say. I know I'm just kind of rambling on here, but again, I appreciate you.
Dr. King.
I just want some clarification.
Yes,
This is version 2. Version 1 has the connector to Fremont Road.
yes.
If you take the,
No, the cul-de-sac.
pardon me?
It has a cul-de-sac.
But it's got, okay, it's got a cul-de-sac, but you're calling that the Fremont touching or whatever.
Sure, yeah, with frontage,
So
yeah.
we take that out.
Mhm.
Are all the lot sizes then in the cream color the same in both versions? Another-
Yes.
So you have the extra depth in there. It's all the same then. So.
Yeah.
So you didn't really expand the 70-foot frontage is still 70 foot, but it goes a lot deeper to make a much larger lot for everybody.
Correct. Yeah.
I would just say from a standpoint of not having been very supportive of this looks like a major upgrade as people are moving to the west to make it transitional to much higher housing because of the added yard space. So that is something that, because I don't want to keep replicating the same thing until we get to a road.
Sure.
You know, there's some point in time where we stop it, and you've tried to make the larger lots, tried to make it so that it has a break from Atwater. And I kind of like version 2 better than 1, just simply because it gives more flexibility down the road for all the homeowners to go together and have a development, or they do smaller lots. I mean, you get a couple more miles down the road, there's an awful lot of 3 and 4 acre homes being built on 3 and 4 acre lots. So, which I'm glad of, but, I'm not convinced, but I heard a lot of people wanting to try to make this work. And this at least gets it closer to making it work than the previous plan.
The 40-foot buffers, is
Yes.
that contemplated to be owned by the association, or who maintains that?
It would be, yeah, so you would still have some common areas and such. I would have to double check these particular areas. I think it's contemplated to be on the lot, but I would need to triple check.
The buffer?
Yeah.
If contemplated to be on the lot and thus privately maintained, would you contemplate increasing, unless nobody agrees with this thought, but increasing the buffers where you're closer to some existing structures, i.e. the homeowners on the west and the east that are pinched between? And then historical context question for those that were involved with Atwater. It looks like the entirety of it has some level of built-in HOA owned buffer around the development just based off of GIS. So would you consider taking a buffer along the division point up to Atwater as well on that east side of it?
Up here.
Yeah.
I would have to double check the depth on like maybe these 6 or 7, because what I wouldn't want to do is say you have a standard depth lot of 140 feet, and then I'm gonna restrict you 40 feet in the rear, which then means I have to restrict my rear yard drainage swale. So essentially I'm making up a 40-foot buffer, then 20 feet of easement, so I'm 60 feet off of a 140-foot deep lot.
Right.
That doesn't really lend itself to having that outdoor living that these people still might want, even though they have a smaller lot. So I would say, because there is you can clearly see the common area strip there. If there's something, where trees ended up on our side of the line, if we needed to make sure that we designed it such that an extra 5 feet or something to make sure that mature trees stayed, we would do that. But I don't think at this juncture, without doing more homework, that I could agree to extend the 40 feet all the way up.
I should have taken, sorry, just real quick, I should have taken a picture of it because I drove down to the stub of where Atwater now, where it would match. And really all that was in that buffer, however big it is, was a mound and a couple of very pre pine trees, very small pine trees. So it's not much of a buffer today. So, I mean, maybe to your point, probably should have just been included into the overall lot. Because there is only 2 homes built at the very west of Atwater, and it's that lot right there, and then across the street, a 2-story, so.
But
Yeah.
back to the question on the south side, though, are you saying the same thing, leave it to them, or, I mean,
Well, I
do you
think,
see merit in increasing width to protect existing homeowners?
yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that was actually another question I had of, with eliminating open space in terms of a playground, pergola, stuff that had been there previously, community garden, how does that overall impact? I know this is gonna be a guesstimate, but the HOA dues, and what would be the responsibility of the HOA versus, again, the homeowner, and bringing back to Billy's point here, is the overall goal to make the HOA expense as little as possible? Because if that's the case, then maybe you just attribute the setback to the individual property owners, as opposed to having it needing to be maintained by the HOA.
So the goal is kind of twofold. That reducing the HOA cost was kind of second on the list. The goal was to provide, the biggest, deepest, largest lot as possible, because there is a demand in Westfield for, let's call this anywhere from 600,000 to 800,000, maybe more, right? By the time we get around to this, and those people have money to spend, and they want to have it in their own backyard. Like, I have 3 kids. I have no desire to go to my community pool that's a half a mile away or a quarter mile down the street, right? It's in my community, but I have no desire to go. I would much rather save up for a couple of years, be able to put my pool in the backyard, and have my own privacy, so to speak. So it was really biggest, deepest lot that gives the ultimate consumer the flexibility to do whatever they wanted. Secondly, was just trying to minimize the common area, but it wasn't so much from a cost perspective.
Well, and to your point, 2 neighbors on the same street as me, they've just put pools in within the last couple of months, year, so, yeah.
Can I ask a question and then add my commentary to this? So are there trees that are trying to be preserved in any of these buffer yard areas?
I don't believe so. I've had conversations with this gentleman here. It seems that his property line stops short of where, this wooded area extends into our site. So if you were just to look at these lots, what you're seeing as new trees, as icons, those probably already exist today. He and I have already had a conversation of, is there a way that we could jog the property line out and around? Because it might be 6 feet, it might be 11 feet.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, these lots are really deep. There's no reason for us to go take down good trees,
Right.
Where they're adjacent to us, unless there's a significant utility conflict. So most of what you see would be new, but of course, where we're abutting areas where you can see significant trees, we would respect those.
Yeah. So I guess my thoughts, and this is really just more for the benefit of the group and just in general, if we are doing tree preservation around perimeters, I would strongly, we don't have a requirement, but we may be heading this direction. I would strongly encourage that tree preservation areas definitely be in a common area, because if they're not, if they're on individual lots, we have run into problems with this very recently in neighborhoods where somebody will build a house, move in, whatever. They are not aware, unfortunately, not made aware that that's a common area or tree preservation area. They're in there clearing out trees and whatever else, and it's technically in violation of the ordinance.
And you get to enforce that ordinance.
We get into
different people or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so it just creates a problem. If there's a defined line that they know, hey, this is a common area, HOA is gonna take care of it, then they're more likely to leave it alone. And I guess probably the same kind of thought if we're like, hey, we want uniform buffer treatment on plantings and whatever, like, I would also suggest we consider putting those in common areas that probably defeat your purpose of deeper lots, but same reason, right? Like if we're gonna really want like uniformity in these common, buffer yards, there's gonna be some expectation that those are maintained a certain way and everybody the same thing, and people aren't, cutting down pine trees when their neighbor isn't, like, those kinds of things probably need to be considered, but if we don't care, like, how they space the trees, just that they have tree, like, then maybe it's not as big of an issue. So there's different ways to probably look at this, but just things to consider, right?
Well, and to your point, when you're contemplating this as a natural demising point to two very distinct uses, I feel like you have to have some level of continuity. Because if you don't, to your point, it's Charlie Brown Christmas tree on the edge line, as opposed to some level of actual flow and demise. And I mean, again, understanding you could look at proximity of Atwater to some of these other homes, that's great, but Atwater was kind of like that fine line of we stopped. And then again, it's two homesteads, not a large number, but still two individuals who are now being pinched completely by it on both sides. And so I think that's where my reservations have always fallen on how to treat the comprehensive plan line of how do you justify that use without significant buffer. And I think to your point, this is the most palatable this has been to me in quite some time, but I think I'd want to see much more enhanced understanding of the kind of landscaping on both sides. And then I don't even know what meeting this first came in front of us. I haven't looked at the actual PUD language in forever. What is the rear yard setback requirements? Do we know that off the top of our head?
I can pull it up.
While you're pulling that up, just to go back to your point, two examples. One of people not knowing where the end of the line is. I've seen that happen in Gristmill, just walking on the Creek Trail. There were trees left between property and the trail itself. I mean, very skinny area for the HOA to possibly maintain. So some residents have just taken it upon themselves to clear out whatever. But then on the opposite end, initially, the reason why the 40 feet buffers were in there was to prevent another Somerset scenario happening. And I think it'd be more prevalent, to go back to your point, on the eastern border of this possible new development, just because the grove of trees that are there. Granted, you have the pond there acting as a buffer as well. But when you look across, like again, when I talked to Stubb, when you look across and even on the GIS, the trees are very sporadic, and it's not like some buildup of, oh, we have to preserve this. It's either on the neighboring property or it's just so far back that I don't know. It would just be up to the individual user if they want to keep it, because I don't foresee, again, another issue like Somerset where utilities having to come into that area. So anyway.
Yeah, the previous ordinance, the proposed rear yard setback was 25 feet.
It was greatly expansive.
We would be willing, let's say we like this plan generally as a group and we wanted to move forward with this plan. If we needed to modify that, we certainly would be willing to do so. But it would almost be on like a case by case basis. We had lots 1 through 14 have a setback of something greater than 25 feet because that lot's deep enough to handle it. And then, as an example, I can't read this, but let's say it's 44 through 48. These lots would have, a setback that's maybe a little bit narrower because you don't have the depth to be able to accommodate that, right? And so in the sense of trying to protect, the adjacent neighbors, we would try to come up with, maybe it's not a rear yard lot setback, maybe it's a setback from the property line. Not much on the lot, but just the parent tract setback.
Yeah, that's kind of a follow-up question, right? Because if you have a 40-foot buffer, but then you're not actually the one maintaining it, where does the actual setback stem from? And so I think for me, as I stare at this and look to garner internal support, understanding exactly what's common area and what's not would be huge. And I would say for me to support it, it would need to be common area controlled, especially for that southern portion. As you get closer to those individuals, those 5 different parcels, really. That's kind of my thoughts.
So to answer your previous question about where is it, I can see it now. I can't see it here, but I can see it now on this one. These lot lines all extend to the western border. So this 40-foot buffer on those deep lots is on the lot. It's not within common area. And that's fine. If we wanted in common area for all the right reasons that Kevin said, And quite frankly, we would want that too. It's just a matter of, we're presenting you a project and the details are gonna say that the average lot size is whatever. And if we want things in common area to protect trees and other vegetation, then those lot sizes are gonna come down. Not because of anything changed, just a function of how we're interpreting and how we're guiding. You know,
That's
rules.
good.
Yeah,
That's a good ad. You're right.
I have a question on this topic. So when we build a house and we have to put landscaping in the front yard, right? That's gets inspected at some point in time,
For a certificate of occupancy.
right?
Yep.
Through a CO or temporary CFO or whatever.
Yep.
Is there some reason that we could require a buffer installed in the backyard and have it be part of that inspection, correct? Like we could say, you have to put 5 trees in your backyard.
It'll get inspected at installation. I think the problem though, we've
Is enforcing.
is the longer term enforcement of it after, maybe the second owner or whatever comes in and that isn't aware
When
that
you
that's the
think
buffer
that,
yard.
yeah, well, just out of curiosity, you think it's, but I mean, do HOAs, I will tell you from my experience around HOAs, I'm not sure that they would pass an inspection either if you went out and checked it, where there's missing trees 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like,
So we don't do inspections after initial installation.
Yeah.
That may change over time, but
Yeah.
right now we don't.
But you do if somebody calls.
and complain.
That's right.
And so I think I'd ask you or any of those HOAs up against incredibly distinct uses to what's been proposed, right? I'm
Yeah.
gonna guess that if a 40-yard buffer is not being respected, you're gonna hear about it pretty
You're gonna know
quickly
about it. Yeah.
based off people that are around it. And so I think, again, to your point, for lack of better words, having a singular throat to choke when it's time as
Yeah,
opposed
with the
to
HOA.
bringing together 12 to 13 different property owners and having them bear the expense of additional plantings that they'll just drag it out and never do.
That's another point that I think is interesting because we've bounced around this Atwater conversation. I think that, and maybe I misheard how we were talking about it, but the velocity at which Atwater is being built out, I don't think is a sign of a location or a proximity to anything. I think it's probably a product and a price point that's driving that more than anything. And like, I don't know if you've driven by any one of these two guys' neighborhoods, but I've not seen one going slow anywhere, right? And I would think that if you had either one of those guys in Atwater, it'd be done right now. And we'd be talking about Section 8 of Atwater instead of a new development. So I did think we ought to be cautious thinking there's not demand right there. I think it's just I think there's something in I don't know if it's the price or the product. I don't know what's going on.
Exactly right. I think that the discussion is more so on the product type. And to your point, though, Pulte would be offering a different product type than what
Yeah.
Waldorf has been building out there. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I think you guys have done a great job. I wasn't hard against it at the beginning. I did appreciate your comments a lot at the beginning about it being an infill project, and I still understand that, but I think if you move away from the cul-de-sac and stay away from Fremont more, I feel like we're now adding another section more than we are creating a new development, and that's just my opinion, so.
Well, to that point, it gives everybody from the city to these residents to whomever comfort and security that you can't stub west, right?
Yeah.
Like, those lots are now pretty set in stone that they're gonna be estate lots.
Yeah.
And now, does that make your job easier? Probably, but it just depends on where the next project comes from. So, I mean, hopefully, it's never my goal and intent to show up to these meetings just for fun and to waste your time, because it certainly isn't. Like, we really did try to be responsive and, try to be sensitive to the feedback that we heard, even though it wasn't maybe consensus all the way across the board. So,
Mr. Mooney.
So I'm not big on forced amenities. I know we talk about amenities a lot. But in a space like this, I would rather see, lots and a price point with the ability, which I think you guys are working towards it, where people could do their own stuff. I think of like a Derby Ridge or something like that. I live in a smaller neighborhood. I'm not gonna say the name because I don't want people visiting, but Like we get complaints about our HOA dues because we're a smaller neighborhood and we have some amenities. And my mind goes to there as well. That's not, that'd be a pretty big burden to have some major amenities in there. So I do appreciate the thought process around that. I think we gotta think about that's the trade-off, right? It's a small neighborhood with some amenities. You're gonna have to have a price point are they gonna want to use shared amenities, or do you go to a larger lot? With the ability and a price point that people want to have their own pool or whatever, maybe they don't even want that at all. So that's kind of where my mind's going to it, but I do appreciate a couple options to think through. I know we gave a ton of feedback in several meetings and that's the whole point of the workshop, right? So I do appreciate you guys going through the process with us. So.
Not to do another comparison, but you bringing up Derby Ridge, the discussion around just buffer space made me start to think of other similar neighborhoods. And I just thought of the cutoff portion of Derby Ridge that's there at the northeast corner of 161st and Ditch Road, where they're kind of secluded by themselves. You just a passerby not knowing any better would think that they're their own little neighborhood. But the homes that butt up to the trees there, that is HOA maintained. There are again though that Derby Ridge is a larger HOA. They have a larger space to maintain and so forth. But going back to the discussion of the trees, I would not foresee HOA maintaining the space between the much larger lots here at the end of the cul-de-sac to the north and the trees behind, because folks back there would just be seeing up there. Yeah, folks back there would just be seeing that as part of their backyard extended. Especially say if they have kids, because it happens in the neighborhood. It happens in my neighborhood across the pond where kids go off into the trees and explore the wilderness, if you will. So I think people that if they would purchase a lot there, they would see that just again as an extension of their own property.
Right, and just to the trees and whether they're on the lot in the common area, that kind of stuff. I mean, we haven't come across this as much because it's been pretty standard that you put them in common area, and for all the obvious reasons. But when I think of things that and how we would be able to try to convey information to the second and third property owner, I mean, we can always put something in the CCRs. Like there's been cover pages for other projects that are near gravel pits, like you will hear blasting, your house may shake, like those types of things can be conveyed. And that's information that's readily available. Again, not that everybody reads closing documents. When you buy your third house, you're probably not reading what the CCRs say until you want to expand or do some architectural thing, and then you find out you can't do it. But I mean, we can go to that extent of trying to convey information should we all decide that the on the lot approach is something that we want to do. Just food for thought.
Oh, I have a question. So those lots who are on the left side, we have literally
These?
you have plants in your backyard.
Yep.
So I built a Pulte home 10 years ago,
Oh,
and I was required to have these 3 trees in the front. It was a part of my landscaping.
yes.
And it was great because it separated me from the street.
Yep.
But don't you think you could operate those that same way? Because you're gonna have HOA and lawnmowers and people back there in different backyards. That doesn't make any sense. If you have a required landscaping, you say these trees are going in your yard, it's required by the city of Westfield, then they take care of it. And then that is just part of their yard. But the ones that are around the lake and the ones that are like not accessible to the backyard of the home, that makes sense to be HOA. So I don't know how you handle that type of thing, but it makes sense to me for the trees that are behind directly connected to a lot, it should be the responsibility of that homeowner.
Right. Yes. Traditionally, we would stop the lot short, put it in a common area, and then there's a 20-foot wide strip that includes mowable grass and trees. And then you hit old Bam, whoever, right, comes out and mows it, and that's the end of it.
Right.
And then there's a clear demarcation over time where you're like, okay, I have maintained to the rear of my lot and I have a push mower, and then all of a sudden a company comes in and they're riding up and down. I mean, you kind of just establish lines and you can see it after time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if it's something where we went down the road of, this lot in lieu of common areas shall have X, Y, Z trees. Yeah, I mean, that is the way that we would have to write it in ordinance to give staff the ability to administer it. But
You know what's
for leading, I mean, Yeah, I mean, we could do it either way, and I would take pointers from whoever has to administer.
Yeah,
But I do
just-
like that layout. That's a nice layout.
I think what we're kind of getting at here is the number is one thing on paper, but the perception is it's just, there's no line in reality. However, what usually forms these rear yards will be fencing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
what I was about to
usually-
say.
One fence goes in, then another fence goes in, and then you kind of establish that
Yeah.
line of responsibility. So just regardless of which way one proceeds, you just want to be extremely clear, whether it's in the ordinance or whether it's in the code enforcement or whether it's in the covenants restrictions. That I think we're trying to be more consistent with just having these items in a common area, just from a staff perspective and a city perspective. But there's many ways to proceed
So
with that.
follow-up question, again, just given how much we've stared at this, the 40-yard buffer, how many trees and plantings are we even talking about? Is that TBD based off of if we
I
like
think it'll be
this?
TBD. I mean, Rex and, staff we'll crack open the ordinance and take a look at this and see what that formulation needs to be.
Yeah.
So,
I think, again, just echo your sentiment. I don't know how it's not in a common area and controlled by the HOA to establish it specifically for this as a demising trans. Like, I think as I've talked a lot about with the comprehensive plan, it's like, it's not so much what are we agreeing to now? It's what are you establishing the precedent for in that kind of fringe area? And so this is the next precedent for what's to come next. And so how are we ensuring that precedent in that fringe area is being respected as we as a body contemplate what does the next comprehensive plan look like?
Well, to your point, lot size is a big factor, right? And so what we're doing is we're actually been beating them over the head about having big lots, right? And we're saying, not that big, because we want you to have a common area in the back. So it's like,
But I
Say
think,
that one more time.
but here, just for the sake of transparency, Chris, where I am with this though, is it's always been, for lack of better words, I don't like this project. Not that the project's not great, just the flow, the fit,
Yeah.
everything else in between, right? But if we're sitting here and actually saying we have decreased the density of the homes and we're actually looking at intentional buffers, it's not so
Yeah,
much
fair.
lot size,
yeah,
it's applicability to this area. And then again, it's a precedent of what is to come. Lot size matters, yes, but use type and density matters. And again, that's kind of interchangeable.
yeah.
But point being is just what are you thinking about of what is to come after
Mm-hmm.
this? Because here's my next question. We've talked about should it Atwater have happened, should it not have happened? If it didn't happen, are we even talking about this project? Probably not, because Atwater was that precedent on the fringe of the comprehensive plan. Sorry for catching you right there.
No, I agree. I definitely respect that.
Respect myself.
Further comment from my fellow commissioners? I'll make a few. Kind of hearing, when I first came in here, I kind of almost made up my mind. And kind of hearing this out, I think I'm a little more open as we kind of get closer to a final product that you would present. I think the reason why there's been so many opinions is because I think we're at that point of we have a decision point. We're talking about transition. We're talking about, I don't want to belabor what's been said, but really, the reason there's been so many different angles at this is because we're debating over what direction we're going to go. The comprehensive plan says one thing, we know it's going to change, but the comp plan's here to stay, or it's here for now and there'll be a new one, and it's Dr. Keene's point, there isn't just like a road line. And at that road line, then we're good. We're going to open things up. At some point there has to be, when do we start forcing that transition? I think this is the best product you've showed us, the one that's here, that gets as close to, I think, what we've been talking about as you possibly can with a plot of this shape and size. And I appreciate that. I also, I'm much more of a, we like our community amenities. I know not everybody does. I don't want a pool in my yard. I know there's other people that do. But again, as you've talked through what the idea is for these dwellings, and this is going to probably be at a price point where you're right. They're going to want more privacy. And so while I typically am, hey, we should be talking about amenities, I think to the conversation we've had, maybe this one isn't right for, a community amenity. And so I was definitely open to that. I have this is probably more for staff. We talked about this on our pre-APC call. I think we're at a point, especially because it sounds like you're gonna take some feedback, probably make a few more tweaks and present something again at some point. Don't we have, are we coming up on a deadline in which we're gonna need an extension for this to proceed in conversation? Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. So for the APC rules of procedures, once a project has received a public hearing, that project has 6 months to essentially conclude in the APC purview. The public hearing for this item was held on August 5th. So we're knocking on the door of that 6-month window. So some sort of action would either need to be taken now or at the next APC meeting on the 3rd.
Could we
Yeah,
extend
there- additional
extend it?
Yeah, as I said, what that looks like is either making a recommendation, probably on the 3rd, or extending, so essentially suspending that rule or modifying that rule and
And
giving an additional
the-
timeframe.
The duration of that extension is at the discretion of.
Yeah, and I just got,
It's something we do then?
yeah, I just got, I pre-teed that up on purpose, 'cause I knew the answer, but I want to make sure everybody else knew. I wasn't testing them.
That was amazing.
I wanted every. Now you know how I run a, now you know how I run a meeting, right? And so, that's a conversation we probably need to have, and I'm, at this point, I'm now at a place where I'm willing to hear more. Where I wasn't walking in here today, personally, that's me. That doesn't mean I don't know how this will move. I know there are also a lot of speaking of different opinions at council, and you have probably a larger hurdle there than you have with us, is how I surmise where things are at. But we have a job. We have 5 statutory items. Do they meet those items? Is this the right thing for this area? I mean, again, we'll have to make a decision at that point. So if we wait till our next meeting at City Hall, we will still be within, or will we be past the 6 months? I hadn't done the calculation in my head because I don't remember when our meeting is.
You said August 5th was the.
They only have a couple of days to get it.
Yeah, August 5th was the previous public hearing. So we just go by months and the rules of procedures, so it's not a day requirement. So
Okay.
it would just be as
February
February 5th
5th, so you have a meeting before February 5th.
on
So
February
we
3rd.
could,
So we
we could
could,
push that decision.
however, we could, you're
You know,
welcome to, I should say, provide a buffer in there if this takes some time for us to coordinate.
Well, then I mean, if they're
Craft an
not,
ordinance.
if they're not going to be ready to come back for a recommendation, regardless of what we do on the 3rd, it makes probably sense to go ahead and grant, if we're going to grant an extension, to do so now. We're here, they're here. Why have them come if they're not ready just for an extension in 2 weeks?
I agree with that. Don't push them, don't make them do something they
mean,
don't need to do.
I don't know how you
Do
feel
you
about
have
that.
any,
I'm open to however you all want to procedurally do it. I mean, based on the feedback that we've heard tonight, let me take Kevin's job, right? My synopsis of the meeting is we're going down this path, not a different site plan design path. I will update the ordinance accordingly. And I would probably go forth and update it such that the buffers are in common area unless someone tells me otherwise. And then I would, as I had promised, I would look at some type of setback that would address the entire site. I don't know how that's worded. I'd have to do some math and thinking, but kind of those are the 3 things that are out there is this plan, setbacks, common areas / landscaping. And that's where I'm headed. I mean, I could do that rather quickly. I think, we're 2 weeks from today is when February 3rd is. So materials probably have to be back to Weston by Friday. The site plan's not really changing. It's just the text and the ordinance on those 3 items, which I think I can get done. So if you all are starting to get comfortable with this idea and you want me to come back on the 3rd, I can do so. If
Well,
you prefer to grant the extension, that's fine. I'm happy to do that too.
I have obviously comments. Obviously, I'm not 100% sold yet because I'm in a better position personally, but as president, I want to make sure that procedurally, everyone has an opportunity to digest things. And if it takes you a little extra time procedurally, I want to hear from my fellow commissioners as to kind of where you're all at. What's kind of the will of what we
I
want
think
to
you can
do?
get it done, but I think it doesn't hurt to give them a little more time.
I mean, I would,
Just in case
if I
they-
were to add one, I would, because I think at some point we need to close the chapter on this regardless of which direction it goes. Maybe just adding a month.
Well, I guess, I don't know if you're allowed to opine, but what are you two comfortable with in saying, hey, we need this time to crank out an actual ordinance that's applicable
Good plan.
Currently, we permit, current rules of procedure, we permit items of business at the first meeting of each month. So it would really only make sense to provide an extension to the first meeting in March, because
We could just
the
extend
first meeting in
again.
February is already in play. So if an extension were to be provided, I would recommend it be at least a month and a half to make sure there's an opportunity to actually achieve what the extension is intending to do.
Can I make that recommendation?
Well, to confirm,
I think it also gives them a chance to work with staff because staff's heard our concerns. So waiting until March to do it would give them the best chance to fine tune this to hit the sweet spot.
Because I definitely don't think we're gonna need to come back to another workshop.
Well, that was good. What was my question gonna be? If that we're doing the extension for a month, then what would be the expectation for Rex and company of either just come back for the business meeting in March, or are they coming back for the workshop meeting in February as well? So that's where I would lean, of just coming back for.
Yeah,
the
I,
business meeting in
I
March.
think it kind of sets a, hey, this is the last shot. I think you're ready. You've heard our feedback, and we get to that first meeting in March, and it goes for recommendation, whichever direction it may go.
I agree.
Well, if
I
you want to
don't,
bring it back in the February, you have the right to do that, but it's better to
Sure.
just get the
Sure.
runway out.
I don't
So you
intend
have
to.
some, okay.
I mean, I feel like we're all gravitating towards a plan and
If you're aiming
Whatever
for
happens-
February 3rd, we would need revisions back by the end of this week. So
Right.
that's kind of what we're up against from a timing perspective.
And it's-
well, that's.
So I
before you
guess
even
let's-
Craft the ordinance around the revision, so I don't think it makes.
Yeah.
maybe we do this. If you all would be agreeable to grant the, let's call it 60 days, because I don't know how many days from here to March,
2 months.
whatever.
Well, I would just even, can we just set it for that meeting date? At the end,
Extend it-
extend it to the meeting date?
We have council on the call.
March 3rd would be the.
We have council.
March
See
3rd,
what we
the meeting? The extension would be to the end of business of the March 3rd meeting.
Sure.
And then that way,
I'm okay.
For the
with that.
March what meeting?
March 3rd,
March 3rd?
It's your own rules, you can
No.
say whatever.
You know my world, I don't live by that. No,
So
no.
you'd be suspending the rules of procedure of Article 9, administrative dismissal of a petition to grant the petitioner an additional 2 months to come at.
not an
the-
additional, it's an additional month because February 3rd or thereabouts would be where it ended. So you still have about a month,
Sure.
but it sounds like to me that there's concern as to whether things will all be ready by the February 3rd meeting. And staff said that meeting's already in play. So giving you till March 3rd,
March, yes.
end of business, March 3rd meeting,
Technically adds a month.
adds about a month.
1 month, okay. that's-
But you've got 2 months from.
Oh, yeah, because it's the February
the
of the
other deadline,
8th
yeah.
one. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
However you need to say it for March
weeks
3rd.
away, it's
we're
fine.
fine. Yeah.
You need a motion for that?
One last thing, I would
Well,
just also say that provides
yes.
then you time not to just button stuff up, but also to follow up with my fellow counselors. And I'll be asking them their thoughts as well, but I think that's also very important because ultimately that's where the decision will be made. So.
Yep.
And I will say one more thing. If you all are comfortable on the pledge, I am more than open to another 30 days at that March 3rd meeting to make sure that the
Yeah, you can always
ordinance
come back and.
and the
request
common
another
area
extension.
thing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that out loud, food for thought for everybody. Because I guess my point is I only ever want to see this one more time.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Oh, yeah, I thought we were friends.
So
for you.
before we move on to the next part, Rex gave a good summary of kind of the takeaway items. That was what I had on my list too. Is there anything else that wasn't covered in Rex's summary of kind of the to-do items between now and next time? Going once.
I have a quick one for the visual learners.
Yes.
When we see this again, will you be able to articulate some of the stuff that we talked about with the buffers and everything in the presentation? Like as far as like what that would look like on some of the lots and some of the
Yes. Can I get you a picture of what the buffers would potentially look like? Yes. I think I will do my best to find a real life photo in lieu of some artistic rendering that you have to use your creativity.
see, that's what we're doing. Yeah. Thank you.
And kind of on that note, just as an additional visualization, does this plan change any of the previous model exhibits that we've seen of what would be going here?
Does not.
So if there were a motion to extend, it would be to suspend the rules and set a extension to the end of business of the March 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Plan Commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can get the section here. Do you have the section next?
Yeah, there's actually an error. It's supposed to be Article 9, first to Article 8. So it's Article 9 Administrative Dismissal, Section 1.
I think this is the first time I've ever had that, done this since
not-
I've been around.
It's not common.
I've fallen into this trap before, so
Yeah,
I've used it before.
got you again, didn't we?
You know what?
Sorry, man.
Used it before.
Oh, he's
so I don't know
used
who
it.
Got who.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we've been got.
So that was Article 9, Section 1B. So
Yes. Stephanie wanted it.
I was just gonna move that we go ahead and allow him the extension to March 3rd, and we get there and we need another extension, we'll go from there. I know that's not super formal, but that's what I move.
Motion's to enact extension.
They'll make it sound good.
Yeah, they'll write it better than.
You write it better than I
Motion
said it. but you know
motion
what
by
I mean.
Mrs. Carlson. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Keene. Any further discussion on the matter?
I'm done talking about it.
Staff, please call the roll.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Dr. Keene,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Mr. Mooney,
Yes.
Mr. Neal,
Yes.
Mr. Woodard,
Yes.
and Mr. Bunkovich.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Sir, we look forward to seeing you on March 3rd.
You never know, it might come before.
Or maybe you come forward. On or before, March 3rd.
Honorable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have two items currently continued to a future meeting. The ever popular Park and Poplar is still there, as well as Grand Millennium Center. Barring anything on those, we'll get to our reports and comments section, beginning with any comments from Plan Commission members to other Plan Commission members or staff.
Mike, I had one question. We had talked many, many meetings ago about, I might get the terminology wrong, but putting the sunset clause or not having them. And in certain projects that we look at, that could have a really long timeline. Where did we really land on thought process around that?
That's always been more of a legal
Thank you.
question than anything, just how it's able to be enforced. Would that be correct, Kevin?
Just came to mind with the presentation that we recently heard with a really, really long timeline,
Yeah.
which we haven't seen one of those in a while. So those are kind of the what ifs that went through my head tonight.
Yeah, I don't know where kind of preferences landed on that. I think there's definitely, we have had some historical concern about even including those, frankly, in PUDs, because not sure they're enforceable. Because the state statute does get into some vesting rights, right, after certain time periods. So, I mean, if they've made any attempt to plat, develop, whatever, even just filing something probably triggers that. I'll defer to legal if we need to get into it more, but it doesn't take much, from my understanding. So we've as a staff kind of really been hesitant or frankly unhappy with the ones that do have those sunset clauses in them, because I'm not sure they're enforceable. It kind of creates a false sense of, hey, we can do something here. Now, if it truly is just sitting there and there's no activity from a zoning approval, that may be a different situation, but.
If I could interject, can you hear me? This is Sydney Darnall. I'm from Taft Law. We're happy to look into that if you would like. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I'm imagining it would require some case law research, but can you repeat the question? And if you want us to do some research, I'd be more than happy to analyze it and send a write-up.
That'd be great, Sydney. Maybe we can connect outside of this meeting. I'd be happy to.
And I think that'd be just beneficial in general to, not just for the planning commission, but for city council as well, and possibly just general knowledge going forward, because that had been a previous concern of projects, say, that were approved in the mid-2000s coming back to just now building. But that's been an issue here in our community. And so that's why prior counselors or whomever have brought up, oh, we need to be including sunset clauses in our projects, because we don't just want developers sitting on land for 10, 15 years at a time. And then all of a sudden they come back to our community and be like, oh, we're already approved. We're getting an ODP. We're building, when they were approved for a Westfield at a different time than who we
Yes,
are
yeah,
today.
that certainly makes sense. Yeah, I'd be happy to connect and do some research on that for you.
Be
Don't
great
get me
to
wrong,
have that
I'm excited about these projects, but as we look at larger, more complex projects over hundreds of acres, it's not gonna have the same timeline as a residential neighborhood. It's just
Well,
not.
we haven't had a recession either. A recession could throw everything asunder, which has happened before. I mean, Ackerson Farms, I'm thinking of
That's exactly what I'm thinking of, Ackerson
the
Farms.
proof for a long time. Just sat there, and a lot of that was related to the economy. And then family situation and.
Yeah. Or Lantern Commons. Yeah.
Sydney, this is Kevin. Well, let's connect this week to kind of talk through this a little bit more and talk about what kind of deliverable and maybe presenting back to the planning commission the kind of the outcome of
Sounds
that.
good. Yeah,
Great.
that sounds great.
Great,
So
thank
many
you.
cons and
Thank you.
cons with sunsets. I really do.
Say that again.
Because I just see cons and cons personally. Like,
Yeah.
and I say that to say, like, I see short-term cons, long-term cons, because like you just think like one day when the 9 of us are no longer here, and then it's even turned into a political weapon of something that we ideated for what we want within the community, but they can lean on a sunset to push a different vision.
Yeah.
Is something else as well. Whether that's my narcissism speaking, if I want what I approve to be built, I don't know, but point is, it's just, you know, it just feels like it could be a vision unwrapper as well if you're not careful.
Well, I think at the end of the day, if you have a plan that's approved, these PUDs, those are literally laws, right? And so we
Yeah.
were saying, like, I can't think of any law in the world, like, that's
TIF.
like, hey, we're only gonna keep this law for like 4 or 5 years.
TIF and a lot of other municipal laws.
And I'm not saying I was
The
for or against
law-
it. We just had a conversation around it
TIF
and kind of, I don't think we ever really
The TIF, right?
landed
I
on
don't know.
Mhm.
decision.
And I think to Woodard's point, that exactly, PUDs are laws, but when something hasn't been before the community for quite some time, that then stirs up the confusion of, oh, hey, wait a second, you know? So just kind of wrap up the conversation, I think it'll be very beneficial to have an actual legal professional opinion on this matter.
You know who else that would be cool for them to know that? It's the general public. It's like,
No, absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean.
That's why I
we
said
talk
for
about
everyone
us,
collectively. Yeah.
You know, it'd be a cool thing to, if you did come up with it, is to share it. Here's the rule.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, thank you.
I would also like to make a reference to how big the banker's eyes got when an attorney talked about billables tonight. He's like, no. Good. I'm good.
I have an item or two, just so I know, because some of our commissioners weren't here at the previous meeting. And in talking to staff, as I've had the opportunity to take the chair of this board, is looking at ways we can revise some rules and processes for better communication between ourselves, mayor, council, how to make meetings run more efficiently, even talking about having items of business at these meetings and being able to make recommendations. So someone maybe wouldn't have to wait till the first meeting of the month each time, you know, not having public hearings at these meetings, they're not conducive to that, but kind of talking about that. And so just in full transparency, trying to bring a couple of revisions to kind of help move things along as we continue to become more efficient. Any other comments from plan commissioners? City council liaison, Councilor McCarty.
Nothing from me, but appreciate the time, just because we had our last council meeting before our last APC meeting. So next council meeting will be next week.
Newly reappointed Board of Zoning Appeals liaison.
ZBA meeting, they didn't
think
make
so.
the deadline, so we'll have something this next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Plat committee, I know, Mr. Jorge is sick. We didn't have a plat committee meeting, obviously, between last week and this week.
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Community development.
No more words of wisdom from me. Keep watching your email. We have not sent anything out yet regarding potential either joint meeting with city council upcoming. Just haven't landed on, potential dates yet. So
Yep.
that's still out there. Still like to do that. So you haven't missed anything.
But for those that aren't familiar, the mayor's kind of requesting in that, hey, how do we communicate better? How do we get better council input before a workshop so that when something is sent to council, they're not caught by surprise of having changes, that they can't change it by law and those kind of things. Have an opportunity to all meet together. I assume it's be a special meeting, so it shouldn't be.
It'll likely have to be a special meeting, and it may or may not be on a Monday. So we'll probably send out a few dates and try to get, pick a date that we get the best response to. So yeah, be on the lookout for that.
Any further business come before the commission?
Yeah, I just saw Janelle today at the Indie Career Luncheon, and she mentioned that she had presented the whole Grand Universe thing. I know we know a lot about what's going on, but she'd like to come and present to APC at some point. Green Park, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. No other business?
We can pick a meeting that we think that would be.
Okay.
Either a workshop meeting.
That sounds like a great
Or a
combined
first.
meeting with our council.
Yeah.
They just had it.
Yeah, he already presented.
Had
to
it.
council.
They probably don't want to sit through it again. I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
It was almost an hour.
There's a lot going on. It's
Victor, you
sad.
could just give it as your city.
I mean, I could pull up the presentation and
Like-
just run through everything, yeah.
Sounds like
We want to hear if we wanted to have a regular. meeting.
Okay.
We're gonna let's have it soon because things are gonna pick up. and
I
we'll have
agree.
a lot of
I
things
agree.
Going on, so
We'll talk offline about when it's appropriate and we'll set something up.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any further business?
Suggestion.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and
Second.
second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8:42 PM.